right, folks, if we can head on in and take our positions. The most important people in motorsports, the ones with the money, are going to be talking next. But once again, I want to take a little time here before the panel as they get settled in to thank one of our supporting sponsors from earlier in the show, epartrade.com. You need to check out this website, folks. You're going to really enjoy it. And from ePartrade, Mr. John Kilroy.
Thank you, Dennis. Just real quick, ePartrade is new. It's one of the newest companies probably here in this building, an online business community for the racing industry. So we're in booth 7199. Check us out. It's really an interesting concept, and I think it'll be good for the racing industry for years to come. Thank you, Tim and Dennis, for organizing the Racetrack Business Conference. It's really fantastic. I always think that we're in an industry that competes against other industries, and this forum for sharing ideas and the amount of horsepower that's in this room right now is really valuable to the racing industry. So thank you.
Big round of applause. They're the ones that took care of our morning break for us, and John will be up on the media and communications panel shortly. All right. Our sports finance group, as I strive to get organized, which at this time of the day is futile. Our first guest is on, and I promised you guys I get a little bit slap happy by this time of the afternoon. Our next guest is on the cutting edge of compensation consulting and risk management. Game Point Capital is all about finding new ways to help build more powerful incentives. Let's welcome Will Hall.
Thanks very much. Happy to be here. As Dennis mentioned, my business is called Game Point Capital. My background is in finance, spent a number of years working for a hedge fund, the last few of which were over in the UK, where I was introduced to the idea of compensation insurance, basically. And so we offer contingency insurance primarily for performance incentives, and that relates to the motorsports field in driver incentives and sponsorship incentives. And the way it works is effectively teams and sponsors can buy insurance to cover their drivers' performance bonuses. This isn't really insurance in the traditional sense, as it pays out when good things happen. So we're really in the business of trying to make sure drivers get paid more, sponsors optimize their budgets, and also track owners can offer more powerful and exciting promotions. So we're happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Big round of applause. Well, here at the Racetrack Business Conference, we like to educate our attendees by inviting some of the smartest people in the business to speak. And our next guest is involved daily in the education of sports executives and is the president of Sports Management Worldwide, an amazing online resource, educational resource, that is. It's Dr. Lynn Lashbrook.
Thank you. I don't belong here, and I think they had a seat. They wanted to fill it. I've had a driver's license longer than any of you, so that qualifies me. And that's where we go. And I love the business of sports. We do cricket, rugby, soccer, football, basketball, baseball. I love this conference because of the dialogue going on, the changes going on. We're all adjusting. Cell phone versus a pay phone. I started an online educational company after the Jerry Maguire movie. We have 27 courses. One is motorsports. Gary Ellis is my faculty member. We're going to have fun today. I appreciate you filling a slot here. I do not belong up here. Let's go.
Oh, come on. Okay. You do. And you provided me with a great tool because I can keep people awake over on this side of the room. All right. Does your banker understand the unique needs of the auto racing industry? We just heard from some guys that were saying, I can't get any money because I'm in Pontiac, Michigan. Well, if they understood what he was doing in Pontiac, Michigan, maybe they would think twice. Our next guest has over 30 years experience in the banking industry. He also understands the racing industry. He's the vice president and motorsports banking relationship manager for Fifth Third Bank. And I knew I wasn't going to get that out. It's Alan Sillick.
Panelists that just spoke. Can everybody hear me?
Up.
the panelists that just spoke, that especially the P&L and balance sheet management, scared the heck out of me because and all the feedback. But I was nervous. I was a little more nervous now, but really happy to be here. Passion is Saturday night racing for me personally first, banking second. Obviously, I have a career and it's been quite successful. But I love going to Saturday night tracks. A lot of track owners here too. Maybe can help me get to their tracks and visit. I like that passion. Best experience so far for a Saturday night track has been recent. Was at Bowman Gray in Winston-Salem. And it is a great show of 17,000 people every Saturday night. And it was a great experience. So glad to be here.
Big round of applause. And also from that same bank, as we out in the country call it, 5-3, he has over a decade of experience in the industry, and he's an expert at helping small businesses manage their credit needs as they seek to grow their business. It's Dan Cava.
Thanks, everyone. I am here to assist our motorsports vertical at Fifth Third with financing needs. So people like Dave Morton from Fifth Third here, wave everyone, Dave, how's it going? And Alan Sulik on the back office for them to help support them as they're evaluating credit requests and they're looking at the lending needs of motorsports racing. That's suppliers to tracks to teams as well. And so I'm the back office to help them out. I'm also here because you guys gave Maddie such a hard time earlier. So I'm the other token millennial here with Will. So you have two millennials on the panel now. So all of your frustration around how your online banking app doesn't work or why the technology is progressing so frequently, you can direct that at us here. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Big round of applause. And Maddie knew we were going to give her a hard time. All right, Alan, starting off, very simple question, but one with a very complex answer, I have a feeling. How do we figure out how much we can safely borrow?
Wow. That is the toughest question today, whoever was on the panel. I promise you that. How do we safely figure it out? It's going to vary. Every business owner is different. Go by your gut. A lot of good business owners know, especially P&L and balance sheet management, they'll know what they can afford, what they can't. Obviously, the banks have matrix and thresholds that we have to follow for cash flow purposes and leverage, but surround yourself around great CPAs, good bankers, and always have that ongoing conversation and plan ahead. Just make sure you plan ahead. Be very proactive and not reactive. We get accused in our industry of they'll lend me money when I don't need it, and they'll and when we want it. Well, that's simply because usually if there's a situation that they need it, maybe an event happened that affected their balance sheet or their P&L that's negative. But just surround yourself around good CPAs and good bankers, and they'll help you with the affordability part.
Dan, when it comes to someone getting a loan approved, what types of data, when it comes to a racetrack situation with their unique cash flow, what kinds of data do you need to look at to be able to approve that credit request?
There's probably hundreds of data points, but the credit piece that first thing as a credit officer when I look at a credit request is I flip directly to the balance sheet. So we hear a lot about P&L and making sure you've got cash flow and you can afford your bills. I look at the balance sheet because that tells me if you're paying attention to what your CapEx needs are, how long you've been profitable over the course of time, and you've really nurtured and grew the business and have been successful. The other thing that the balance sheet tells me as a credit officer is, can you weather those downtimes and can you weather the cyclicality that you may have in the industry or even the seasonality of your businesses. So that's one thing. I think the second thing, we're talking about the income statement. I mean, banks, to be honest, they like businesses that make money, right? That's my favorite customer in the world, is the one that makes money. It makes my job a lot easier. It makes Alan's job a lot easier. But understanding, too, the cash flow cycles and the seasonality of the businesses. So if you're talking to someone and you want to have a loan package put together and you have seasonality, banks often ask for year-end statements. Well, that might not be your peak performance or the best example of who you are in your business. So provide them quarterly statements or talk with a CPA to get some better financial reporting so that you can tell your banker the story, who then could tell people like me in the back office how your business operates and what's needed there for your unique scenario.
The one thing I love about the Racetrack Business Conference is we can take a subject and attack it from different ways. We've got the obvious way of finding capital, borrowing it, but there are other ways to go ahead and leverage capital, if you will. Now, we all in racing are aware of all the incentive bonuses that are there to win the points championship. But how could a racetrack or a series build a competition payoff that's pretty sizable but hard to win, hard enough to win that a company like yours could go ahead and help them find a solution? How can some of these performance-based incentives work in the racing industry? Well,
I think you're exactly right to point out that the racing industry is clearly moving towards a more incentive-based model, and we see that as driver pay comes down and it shifts to a more equitable balance between fixed salaries and performance-based pay. So there's a variety of ways on the team side, with it, whether it's structuring drivers' compensation more to be more tied to performance incentives. Same with sponsorship deals, and we're happy to work with a number of different racetracks. My brother and I run this company, and we've been trying to come up with some different ways specifically for racetrack operators. And I think the most obvious application is probably on the promotion side. So we can do insurance for different performance-based promotions. For example, if somebody sets a track record in a race that day, they get a huge $50,000 bonus. You insure that for pennies on the dollar. It drives fan engagement. It makes the competition more competitive. It brings different racers and drivers in that might not otherwise come in. So I think the promotion side is really the most obvious application.
How exotic does that have to be? How tough does that have to be to win in order to get those pennies on a dollar? Because if it's just winning 3 races a row in your local short track, they may have some hot shot that's winning 7 in a row on a regular basis.
I think it all depends on how much you want to pay. So if you say, okay, well, we're not willing to pay more than 10% on a premium on some promotion, then we can structure a deal that basically fits that model. If you say, well, we just want to reduce it in half, then you can create something that's a lot easier to achieve. So it doesn't have to be that exotic or unattainable to make that work.
Very cool. Dr. Lynn, okay, I'm going to be honest. We just invited you here because I need tickets to the Combine so I can get one up on the rest of my fantasy analysts. I'm just
You've
kidding.
done a good enough job. I'll reward you.
I'm just kidding. We talked about sports betting earlier in the day. Is sports betting maybe a new way to find some capital as we want to expand and grow? Is there ways to tie in either some sports betting sponsorships or some sorts of deals?
My son owns the Las Vegas Lights down in Vegas, of course, and he had some betting going on. Of course, I've been doing it in Europe. I travel around the world. I think it's a 2.0 revolution with revenue streams for sports betting, whether we like it or not. Out in Oregon, I voted for marijuana to be legalized. I never smoked it. And the world is changing. And I think that's what I enjoyed today, whether you bring up the question of additional revenues. Esports is another cross-pollination of synergy that, I did the Pong. I mean, we're changing, very rapidly changing. I get some of us are nervous about this or that, but it's a tough business. The bankers will tell you the same thing. There's new models out there. And I think the gambling's here to stay. I think it'll be mobile. And I think there'll be revenue streams on the vertical all the way down to the smallest track and the largest. And it's just part of life. And it's worked in Europe and other places, and it worked in Vegas for 100 years. And I think we're in a 2.0 revolution that really answer your question. Yeah, there's acceleration of money monetizing the business model like never before. I don't know the banks, how they feel about it, but it's here to stay. They can't even stop it.
So true. All right, before I throw out the next question, I want to go ahead and solicit some questions from the audience. So if you've got a question for our experts up here on stage, please raise your hand. But I'm going to toss a question out in the meantime here. To the banking side of things, how much money does it take to refurbish a facility, and how tough is that to get a good deal on that? I mean, is that something that you guys have looked at enough that you know what is viable as far as how much money might be available?
Well, Dan's going to help me on this one too, based on what he sees in the back office. But I think it's more of a square foot thing too, and a cost and what's the going market rate. I mean, Dan, do you agree?
Yeah, I think that obviously cost of project and each scenario is going to be different. I think when a bank is looking at it too, we're looking at, is this CapEx to replace what you're already doing, or is it a new source of revenue stream or a new asset that is going to help drive revenue and ultimate profitability? So as you guys are thinking here today, and you've heard a lot of suggestions around diversification of revenue and being able to bring on attract new people into your tracks, that as a banker is good news to me, because it helps with cyclicality, it helps with seasonality, and it also shows that you guys are thinking about investing in your business. And so if you're thinking about investing in your business, it's going to attract banks to want to invest in you as well, because we've got just as much skin in the game, if not more sometimes, for our borrowers than they do. So hopefully that helps.
Right down front here with a question.
Testing. There we go. Thank you. It's me again. Two questions for two different individuals. First and foremost, all the years of doing golf tournaments for charity through Rotary, hole-in-one, we'd buy the insurance. You're doing a similar thing, if I understand you correctly. But the real question is, what's the payout ratio?
It's going to vary based on the likelihood of the event, right? So hole-in-one, again, it varies completely. So we do a lot of work with college athletic departments and their coaches' bonuses. They can ensure that if a team's going to, if there's a bonus that pays out if the team wins 6 wins, it's going to obviously pay out a lot more often than it pays out for winning the national championship. For the hole-in-one, it's pretty universal in how they calculate that. It's about 1 in 12,000 is basically how the insurance is calculated. A little inside info for those people buying that. And so it's going to vary completely. But it is, you're exactly right to liken it to the hole-in-one. Again, paying out for something that's good that happens or a positive outcome.
With a low probability.
With a low probability, typically.
And the second question concerns financial metrics for businesses like racetracks. Is there anything in the industry that you can identify as a standard or as an expectation for things like debt to equity, return on assets, or EBITDA?
Okay. So yeah, I would say most banks are going to look at two different calculations, primarily on the cash flow side. You're going to look at a fixed charge coverage ratio, or you're going to look at a debt service coverage ratio. The primary difference between a debt service coverage ratio and a fixed charge ratio is that if you are maybe leasing a facility or have other lease expense out there, we're going to include that in that ratio. Typically, banks are going to look for a cushion, right? So for every dollar of debt service that you have, we may want to see $1.10 or $1.20 or $1.25 in income or EBITDA coming in and the bottom line, and we look at EBITDA numbers, then including the non-cash add backs into the request. And then on the other side, I mean, there's two ways that at least at Fifth Third we look at leverage. We look at a cash flow leverage, and we look at a tangible net worth leverage. So the cash flow leverage is how much you're borrowing against your annual EBITDA, and we do that ratio. And then we also look at a tangible net worth coverage, which is the book value of your assets against how much you borrow, and usually in those ranges, banks will be between 3 and 5 times is kind of where they want that leverage ratio to be.
All right, Lynn, one of the things stick and ball sports have done pretty well in finding new capital is branding of facilities with sponsors. How long-term of a branding rights sort of a deal is viable, and do you think there's room for more of that? I mean, we've seen some in motorsports, but do you think that's an area that we're missing as far as a source of capital?
I do. I'm going down to the Vegas to the MLB winter meetings, naming rights. I've been involved trying to bring Major League Baseball to Portland and the discussion of naming rights and the right match. I think the evaluation, the expertise in that is what do we get in return on those naming rights? And it's not as simple as just the ego. Even Lucas Oil, you wonder about the return on the investment of a product like that. It's not necessarily a consumer-driven as much as a loyalty thing. So it just takes one bit, if I may, but I think we're all looking at those sponsors and also fragmented sponsorships within the arena. I'm always amazed how many sponsorships there are, sub-sponsorships, in a venue. But I think venues are fascinating right now, and I do think that's another area where people are trying to extract more and more and more.
Right over here.
My name's April Clark, and I'm with BAPS Motor Speedway in Central Pennsylvania, and we are always looking for advice on managing our cash flow. And what I mean by that is protecting it at the track with our employees, with our safety. I don't know if this question is appropriate for this panel, but we've tried marking bills, security cameras, everything like that, but we're always missing some. So I didn't know if you had any advice on that.
Protecting your cash at the track from theft or just kind of disappearing?
Mainly employees that are handling it, managing it, and so on.
I mean, there are, and I can definitely talk to you offline too, but there's products cash vault products that you can install and have have an armor car pick it up. That's one thing. It's a little bit pricey. Got to see the volume to make sure it's worthwhile for your expense, but that would be the main thing. Or, as far as cash disappearing, I know it's tough when you're hiring people, but you got to have that trust factor. The only thing that we can offer is that cash solution product. But I'd love to talk to you more. That's a good question. Yeah, great question.
Dan, question for you specifically. What are some of the best practices that we can employ as business owners before we need to borrow? Again, specific to the racing world, where cash flow is a lot different than a lot of sports. What can we do to get the data already worked up for you in advance so it makes your job easier to say yes?
Yeah. One of the things I mentioned earlier was understanding the seasonality of your business and being able to talk to your banker about that, and also your CPA. Alan mentioned earlier that having a good CPA banker relationship and having that advisory team to you guys is important. I would agree with that 100%. And the reason why is that CPA is trying to reduce your tax liability, right? And to find ways for you to shelter that money and be able to provide the most money in your pocket. Whereas I, as a lending officer, I want to see you make as much money as possible, right? So we're in conflict there oftentimes with what the CPA is charged to do and what you want from the bank. So getting together with the CPA ahead of time and your banker, and then talking through what kind of project you want to undertake or what you're looking to do well in advance of when you want to do it, is certainly probably the number one thing that I would recommend. And then you have your banker and your CPA talk about, okay, well, this year I got to show a little bit more cash flow and I can't take as many exemptions on the tax return to reduce the liability, and really to show that in that regard. So I think quality of financial statements too, and that directly involve the CPA, good quality financial statements, monthly, quarterly, annually, and then having that, really looking at your CPA and banker as a team to advise you is probably the two things that I would recommend.
I was going to talk about the quality of the financial statements too, because it's one thing that we do try to achieve. And Dan is on the credit side, I'm on the sales side, and we have that partnership. We always talk about what kind of financial statements are they producing, but well said for Dan.
All right, well, putting you on the spot now, young man. In other sports, what are some of the craziest ideas you've seen for incentive-based bonuses that you think might have an application to the racing world?
That's a good question. I think one of the examples is UConn's football coach this year gets a variety of bonuses for different things, one of which is if they score first in a game. So basically he's incentivized to just take the coin toss and get the ball if they flip the coin, which is a little bit of a perverse incentive because that's not necessarily always the right way to go about it. But there's literally incentives for everything. So if you say, okay, lead the most laps in a race, again, if there is a performance outcome that can be measured, then there is an incentive that can be created to reward that, and there's a possibility to then come to us and say, well, we can insure that existing bonus, or we'll tell you you can insure it for 5%, and then you can give a much bigger bonus and again insure it out for pennies on the dollar to drive the outcome that you're looking to do. Whether that's to drive more fan excitement. If you said, well, people really like that when this happens for these drivers, and you want to incentivize that to happen more often, then that could be an interesting way to go.
And I want to thank you guys because I had an incentive bonus through your company, through Tim, for the number of questions asked today. Honey, we going to Sizzler? No, I'm just kidding.
Happy to help out.
When we talk about investing in our companies and in our businesses, but we also got to invest in the people people that are helping to run these businesses. Dr. Lynn, I'm putting you on the spot. What are some of the best ways that folks can sort of invest in their people and build better employees and better executives within the racing industry?
So we, in our office, we're on the phone all day, and we have 160 countries have taken our course. Every one of my employees has their own TV and TV station. I think we miss that in sports and even in the banking business, watching your favorite team games all day. And, you know, with cable and the internet, my Royals, for example, being from Kansas City, I see all my games on my phone. But I really try to provide, we're a sports company, but everybody has their team they grew up with. Everybody in sports has a favorite team, and I really try to incentivize that. And we do have a few happy hours. I believe a little alcohol like you're doing at the end of the day is important. It's a morale booster. I'm not an alcoholic, but I think alcohol is a good lubricant in this business. And those are my ways of investing in our company. And they get paid if they do well. So
I like
take
that
care
idea.
of that. We don't do any of the hole-in-one gimmicks, but we do pay them on commission, which is a secret to any good business.
There you go. For our banking group here, I'm going to put you guys on the spot with a question here. How important, like Fifth Third is not the only one with a motorsports division, but you guys are understanding the business better than almost anybody else in the business right now. How important is it to these folks trying to run a track that their banker really understands the racing industry, because it is very different from other businesses?
Yeah, especially the competition question first. As far as, yes, there's various banks that do it. There's community banks in our marketplace. I live and work just north of Charlotte, North Carolina, and it seems like we all have our own little niches too. And what we really try to do, especially in what I would call business banking motorsports, and even the entire bank in motorsports, we really try to get involved. The bank has asked me this year to lead an effort and be a one-man wrecking crew for now for smaller business segments to complement what Dave has done for the last 6 years. And with that said, I'm to the point of my life. I was telling our millennial Maddie over there that I can go to a lot of Saturday night events. My kids are in college or they're grown, so it is very important for me to get involved and to let that business owner know that I'm involved. I'm not going to know as much as them. I'm not going to know as much as the people in this room, but I'm going to sure try and relay that information that I learn every Saturday night or whatever to credit if we need to do a loan product. But one thing that's really popular right now is business acquisitions. Everybody's to that point of either selling or turn it over, and we give pretty darn good advice on that too.
So I'd like to just put a plug in for Alan and Dave, and not because he's buying my drinks later, but because I think one of the things we talk about differentiation, these guys have a passion for this. They're involved. They pay attention. They're all in from the banking side on this, and that comes through when they're presenting client cases to me and that information. So having a banker that understands you and that is an advocate for you in any way, shape, or form is best for you. So if you guys, wherever you're from, aren't feeling that your banker is an advocate for you, then I would look for someone that does do that. And these guys do a pretty good job, at least from my perspective, of advocating for our borrowers.
Question right over here. Yeah, and Dave Morton with Fifth Third Bank as well, and I think we're going to owe Dan a double or two tonight based on what he just said.
You're taking my incentive program, aren't you?
That's exactly it.
We're going to need some insurance for that.
Seems like it's likely to pay out, so I don't know if that's going to work.
So I had one comment, and then just one thing I wanted to get Dan and Alan to comment on that I think would be of value is my comment is a lot of times we see motorsports companies, and outside of motorsports as well, you all are really good at running tracks and other companies out here, the suppliers of the sport, they got the technology side, they may be really good at sales, but in terms of running a business financially, that's not necessarily always your forte. And one of the things that we have run into repeatedly is we see a lot of businesses they want to buy a new piece of equipment or make a capital improvement here, and they kind of just they just keep adding on these different investments instead of stepping back and strategically looking at it. And we've had situations where customers of ours, really more active prospects of ours that we've talked to, we're trying to win their business, and we take a look at their debt load, and because they didn't strategically look at it, they find themselves in a situation where they're upside down, and they have a much higher debt load than what they ever expected to have because they didn't take a long-term view of where they were headed and what types of investments were going to be required in the business. So it's really helpful, and I'm sure Dan can speak to this even more so, to look at it strategically over a multiple year period instead of just on an annual basis and looking at what needs you might have. So that was my comment. Alan and Dan, there's a lot of different options for capital. That traditional SBA and other sources. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that, just to help everybody here in the room understand what are some of the options?
I'll speak more on an alternative SBA, which is Small Business Administration. It's a guarantee from the federal government. SBA, when I'm talking to a client that might not have proper equity injection, might not have that 20%, we'll have the 10%, or we're just missing something. We're just off a little bit on cash flow, or we're off a little bit on leverage. We'll rely on that SBA program to provide a guarantee, which is 75% of the amount back to the bank. That usually is the difference of doing a loan or not doing a loan for somebody to help them. So that's one source that we lever upon a lot. We have a great partnership. We are a preferred lender to the SBA, which means up to a certain amount, I think it's $5 million is the cap for SBA, we can underwrite and approve those transactions as long as it fits within their guidelines and not have to go to the Sacramento office to get approval.
Yeah, one of the other things that we use SBA for as well is if you've got a really large project and it's going to drive future revenue, and we're relying on projections, right, and future cash flow that you haven't yet earned or have shown that you've earned in the past, we'll leverage the SBA for those scenarios too, and we're really relying fully on this project coming to fruition and generating revenue in that regard. So it's not only beneficial from a highly leveraged scenario or an equity injection scenario, it's also if you're taking on an aggressive project that's well thought out, and we might need that SBA guarantee to just get over the hump there on that one.
A little different twist to a question here for you guys. I love putting people on the spot. Will, why is the motorsports world fun to work with?
I think, again, coming from a traditional finance background, sports in general was really obviously fun for me to work with. So that's great to follow that every day. Now I get paid to watch college football games and racing, which wasn't necessarily the case before when I was spending a lot of time looking at financial statements and 10Ks all the time. So specifically with racing, I think, there's a variety of benefits, but just that it's pure competition at its finest. There's a winner at the end, and there's the excitement of all the ways to get there.
Lynn, why is the racing world even more fun to play around in than the stick and ball sports?
Well, now hold on, that's fair, but I think there's plenty of room to go around, and we're talking about 8 billion people around the world. I always say go global or go home, and to be honest with you, we need the fabric of a free world is sports. A substitute or synonymous piece, substitute for war. It sounds corny, but at the end of the day, all of us are talking about the competition, who's going to win. That's why we go to the race. That's why we go in our bedroom and play that esports, whatever. Who's going to win? It's the unknown. I've been in sports since I was 5 years old when I played catch with my dad in Kansas City, Kansas. I've never left it. I'm 70 years old. I never left it. And it's just, I can't imagine being the boring banker or anybody else, and he knows what I'm saying here because you love it or you wouldn't be here today. But sports brings an element of excitement and fun, and kids, everybody would love to work in sports. I always say adrenalize today and monetize tomorrow. Getting paid for your passion, to me, is a secret to happiness in life besides a family, and that's why there's no other industry that brings that like sports. Nobody, motorsports included.
All right, Alan, I'm putting you on the spot here. Why are we more fun to work with than other industries and other businesses?
very specific answer to that, and it's me. It's not anybody else on this panel, but I have always been called a blue-collar banker. Always, always, always. I think one boss didn't even like the fact that he said it to me, but that was a previous bank ago. But I just the whole dirtiness to it and the pipe bending, and this my passion. And again, it is small teams and tracks, but in suppliers, and that's just my passion, or I wouldn't be up here and trying to. I'm just telling Dave, I'm fully engaged in what I do because I love what I do. I can't be that funny.
All right. Last question for the panel before we wrap this thing up. Lynn, why is it important for you to appear at panels like this? What do you get out of conferences like this, as well as, do you get more out of this than your students get out of your services?
I go to every sport. I go into Europe. I'm just telling you, it's a big business. We have students every month that want to get into the business. We help them. We do online education, which is as much a revolution as a 2.0 sport business. And this is an incredible, incredible group of people. I call them silos of sports. I come into motorsports. I'll go to baseball. I enjoy they're all different, but they're all the same. And it's just exciting. What a quality group of people. And I'm not patronizing, but quality people, sincere about their business and passionate about it. And you can't help but learn from each other.
Will, what have you learned from attending the conference and being on the panel? Do you have a bitter feeling of what we do here in motorsports?
Absolutely. I learned that I need to go out to one of these motorsports country clubs, too. That sounds like a lot of fun. That was, I think, top on my list after coming out of this today.
Very good. And from our bankers, I noticed you guys were attending all day. Did some of the topics that we talked about today help you when it comes to servicing your motorsports clientele better?
I corny, but came here to be educated. It exceeded expectations for education, and that's another way to get involved in what I do for a living, and hopefully build trust between business owners and the bank. We're trying to know what we're doing here and trying to help and add value to your business.
That's the same for me. The education piece and hearing from you guys what your pain points are, what's coming on the horizon, I think is good from a banking perspective. So when we know that, hey, I'm going to put an esports arena in my track, we can kind of get an idea of why that's happening. Or hey, I'm going to put some condos on my property to do some sort of pseudo country club, kind of model and diversify revenue stream. Hearing these conversations and the successes and pitfalls certainly helps us when we hear those opportunities come up in marketplace.
And don't forget, folks, when you get home, all of a sudden, you're going to have the memory jogged of, I should have asked this question. All the contact information for these folks up on the stage, as well as all of our panelists, are going to be in your little hymnal. Will, final thoughts?
Thanks again for having me here. Appreciate it. It's been a lot of interesting topics so far. I think one thing to take away that I've heard from these guys is that there are a lot of avenues to get capital out there, whether it's traditional bank loans. I spoke with a number of my private equity friends who are active in the motorsports space, and their general consensus was that there is more capital seeking good businesses in the motorsports than there are actually great motorsports businesses out there. So I think if you run a sound business model, you'll always be able to access capital, whether it's, again, from the debt markets, the equity markets, what have you, and I saw that in my experience working in the capital markets before that. So I think that should be encouraging to folks out there.
Alan, final thoughts?
Surround yourself, especially the business owners, surround yourself around good people, good professionals that could help create efficiencies in your business and save you time and money.
Dan?
Probably similar. Thanks for the information, the education. Not often do when bankers walk in the room, they're acknowledged or appreciated, but you put us on stage, and so I thank you for that small glimmer here today.
Yeah, Dr. Lynn, take us home.
Innovate. You just got to keep innovating. You can't get stuck. The payphone died in 20 years. Don't become a payphone. Get over it and get the cell phone and move yours up a grade. You need a better one than a 4. Okay.
Hey, it's still working. All right. What did we learn?
Mine even has a camera.
What did we learn from our sports finance group, except that I need an iPhone 10? We learned that you need to find a banker who understands motorsports, and the guys right up here on the stage would be my recommendation. Also, consider some performance-based incentives, and our folks at Game Point Capital can help you there. Manage your data before you need to borrow money, and invest in yourself with great online education, such as the folks from Sports Management Worldwide provide you. Let's have a big round of applause.